Ladies and gentlemen, imagine a small Himalayan nation cradled between two giants, suddenly becoming the stage for the world's fiercest geopolitical tug of war. That nation is Nepal. And today, then its political destiny is no longer just its own. It has become a battleground where Washington and Beijing are silently but fiercely clashing. And the story unfolding in Kathmandu is not just about a change of government. It is about the collision of two superpowers who see Nepal as more than a neighbor to India. It is a strategic prize, a gateway to influence, a front line in the contest for dominance in Asia. For the United States, Nepal is a foothold, a democratic ally in the making, a chance to check China's influence in South Asia. For China, Nepal is an extension of its own backyard, a buffer zone to safeguard its Belt and Road projects and to keep American presence at bay. Both powers are playing the game with intensity, and Nepal is caught in the middle. But let us be clear, this struggle is not isolated. It reverberates in New Delhi, in Washington, in Beijing, and in every capital that understands the fragile balance of global power. India, with its deep cultural, historical, and geographic ties to Nepal, cannot afford to stand idle. Every shift in Kathmandu sends ripples across the Indian border, shaking not only security dynamics but also the very balance of influence in South Asia. What we see today is more than politics. It is strategy, ambition, and survival rolled into one. Nepal's regime change drama is exposing the cracks in a world where smaller nations are forced to choose between two giants. And as this rivalry heats up near India, the consequences could reshape the future of the entire region. The question is not only who wins this power play, it is whether Nepal itself can maintain sovereignty, stability, and independence in the face of overwhelming external pressure. Because when superpowers fight, it is often the smaller nations that pay the highest price. Nepal, as a geopolitical battleground, is not just a passing phrase, it is the reality of how global politics now plays out in the Himalayan region. Nestled between two giants, India and China, Nepal has historically tried to maintain its sovereignty through careful balancing acts. But the current dynamics have escalated it into a frontline arena for superpower rivalry. What makes Nepal uniquely significant is not only its geography, but also its role as a buffer state. To the north lies China with its economic and military ambitions stretching across Asia, while to the south sits India, which shares open borders, then cultural heritage and deep historical ties with Nepal. This geographical placement alone makes Kathmandu more than just a capital of a small nation. It makes it a chessboard where powerful states seek influence, leverage, and strategic advantage. The United States, although geographically distant, has recognized Nepal's importance in this balance of power. Through initiatives like the Millennium Challenge Corporation, MCC, and increased diplomatic presence, then Washington is signaling that it views Nepal as a critical point to push back against Chinese expansion and to reinforce its vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific. China, on the other hand, views any American footprint in Nepal as a direct threat to its security, particularly since Tibet shares a border with Nepal and has always been a sensitive region for Beijing. This clash of interests between the two largest economies in the world means Nepal is constantly under competing pressures, both economically and politically. The regime change debates within Nepal are not entirely about domestic governance or policy shifts. They are often fueled, supported, or resisted by foreign powers seeking to tilt the balance in their favor. When one faction leans towards Washington, promises of aid, development, and stronger democratic ties accompany it. When another tilts towards Beijing, pledges of infrastructure, investment, and Belt and Road opportunities quickly follow. This tug of war places Nepal's sovereignty in jeopardy, forcing its leaders to play a delicate game of survival while ensuring they do not become pawns sacrificed in the larger strategic contest. The irony is that for ordinary Nepalis, the struggle is less about global rivalries and more about stability, governance, and economic opportunity. Yet the decisions of Kathmandu's leaders now echo in Washington's foreign policy circles and Beijing's security calculations. The idea of Nepal as a mere small state is outdated. It has become a testing ground for how superpowers project influence in South Asia. Every political shift in Nepal today is read as either a victory for one power or a setback for the other. transforming this Himalayan nation into one of the most contested geopolitical spaces in the region. And the United States' interests in Nepal stem from a combination of strategic, political, and ideological motivations, all of which converge to make this small Himalayan nation far more important than its size suggests. For Washington, Nepal is not merely a remote country tucked between India and China. It is a potential foothold for expanding American influence in South Asia and countering Beijing's tightening grip on the region. The U.S. has long seen value in cultivating allies that can anchor its larger vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific, and Nepal, given its strategic location, is a natural candidate. American policymakers understand that Nepal's political direction has significant consequences, not just for South Asian geopolitics, but also for the broader U.S. strategy to contain China's rise. One of the clearest examples of U.S. interest is the push for the Millennium Challenge Corporation (MCC) Compact, which was presented as an economic aid package but carried significant geopolitical undertones. While publicly framed as a development initiative to enhance Nepal's infrastructure and energy connectivity, many analysts viewed it as a tool for Washington to deepen its presence in a region where China has already invested heavily through the Belt and Road Initiative. This reflects a broader pattern in U.S. policy than offering economic incentives that come with the promise of alignment with democratic values and closer ties to the Western world. By positioning itself as a partner for Nepal's modernization and democratic aspirations, the U.S. is attempting to win the trust of Kathmandu while limiting China's leverage. Beyond economics, the U.S. has also invested in Nepal diplomatically and culturally, supporting democratic institutions, governance reforms, and civil society. This aligns with Washington's global narrative of promoting democracy as a counter to authoritarian models, particularly China's state-controlled governance. For American strategists, a Nepal that tilts toward democratic practices and Western partnerships becomes not just a regional ally, but also a symbolic success in a region where China's influence has grown sharply. Washington also sees Nepal as a potential partner in broader regional security dialogues, even though Nepal traditionally avoids military entanglements. By strengthening defense cooperation, intelligence sharing, and humanitarian assistance ties, the U.S. quietly enhances its strategic footprint. Then underlying all these efforts is the recognition that Nepal's decisions reverberate beyond its borders. Its proximity to Tibet makes it a sensitive area for China, and any deepening of U.S. involvement in Nepal is perceived in Beijing as a provocation. This means that for the United States, every gain in Nepal represents not just an expansion of its influence, but also a direct challenge to Chinese dominance in Asia. In this sense, Nepal has become a symbolic frontier of the U.S.-China rivalry, then where Washington's interest is not only about helping a small democracy prosper, but also about proving that it can still shape the balance of power in one of the most contested regions of the world. China's strategic stakes in Nepal are deeply rooted in geography, security, and long-term economic ambitions, making the Himalayan nation far more than a friendly neighbor in Beijing's eyes. For China, Nepal is a natural extension of its strategic frontier, sharing a long border with Tibet, a region that has historically been sensitive and tightly controlled. Any instability or foreign influence in Nepal is viewed by Beijing as a direct risk to its grip on Tibet. And this concern alone explains why China invests heavily in ensuring that Nepal remains aligned with its interests. A stable, then China-friendly Nepal acts as a protective buffer, while a Nepal leaning toward the United States or India is seen as an immediate threat to China's Western security corridor. Economically, the Nepal forms an important part of China's broader Belt and Road Initiative, the massive infrastructure and trade project designed to link Asia, Europe, and Africa under Chinese leadership. By investing in roads, energy, and connectivity projects in Nepal, Beijing is not only providing development assistance but also binding Nepal into its economic orbit. For China, every new highway that links Kathmandu closer to the Tibetan border, every energy deal that ties Nepal's resources to Chinese markets, and every infrastructure project funded by Beijing is a step toward ensuring long-term dependency. This strategy ensures that Nepal while benefiting from development, gradually shifts its economic reliance away from India and toward China, reshaping the regional balance of power. Then, diplomatically, China seeks to prevent Nepal from falling under Western influence, particularly from the United States, whose increased involvement in Nepal through aid and development projects Beijing perceives as a form of containment. Chinese officials have repeatedly emphasized the principle of non-interference while simultaneously ensuring that Nepalese political factions sympathetic to Beijing are supported and empowered. This careful balance allows China to expand influence without appearing overtly interventionist. Beijing's goal is not simply to maintain friendly ties with Nepal, but to make sure no foreign power can use Nepal as a foothold against Chinese interests. Then, culturally and politically, Beijing has also invested in promoting narratives that emphasize shared history, mutual respect, and economic partnership. This soft power complements the harder edge of strategic and economic engagement, then allowing China to present itself as a benevolent partner rather than a domineering power. For Beijing, the ultimate objective is clear. Nepal should remain firmly outside the sphere of US military and strategic influence, while progressively leaning toward Chinese economic and political alignment. In the broader US-China rivalry, Nepal is a frontline state where China cannot afford to lose ground, making its stakes there inseparable from its ambitions to secure regional dominance and protect its vulnerable borderlands. India's strategic concerns regarding Nepal are deeply intertwined with history, geography, culture, and security, making developments in Kathmandu more consequential for New Delhi than for any other regional power. The two countries share an open border stretching over 700 kilometers, allowing for free movement of people, goods, and traditions. Millions of Nepalese work in India, while countless Indians cross into Nepal for trade and cultural exchanges. This level of interconnectedness means that political instability or foreign interference in Nepal is felt almost immediately within India. Unlike the United States or even China, which engage with Nepal from a distance, India cannot insulate itself from whatever shifts occur in Nepal's political or strategic orientation. From a security standpoint, India views Nepal as a vital buffer state. Any foreign power gaining undue influence in Nepal is seen as a potential breach in India's northern defense line. Historically, India has relied on the Himalayas as a natural shield against external threats, but foreign encroachment in Nepal reduces that protective depth. This is why New Delhi closely monitors any moves by China to increase its military or infrastructural presence in Nepal. And even the construction of roads and railways linking Nepal with Tibet is scrutinized, as India fears such networks could eventually be used for strategic purposes beyond trade. The memory of the 1962 Sino-Indian War still shapes India's sensitivities, and Nepal, being sandwiched between the two rivals, and becomes a crucial part of this defensive calculus. Economically, India has long been Nepal's largest trading partner and a primary source of investment and energy cooperation. However, China's growing footprint threatens to erode India's dominant role. For New Delhi, losing influence in Nepal is not just an economic setback, but a symbolic weakening of its natural leadership in South Asia. India sees itself as the anchor of stability in the region, and any drift of Nepal toward Beijing challenges that self-image. Furthermore, since Nepal shares deep religious and cultural ties with India, particularly through Hinduism and shared traditions, any reduction in people-to-people connections would be seen as a blow to India's soft power. Politically, India faces the dilemma of respecting Nepal's sovereignty while also ensuring that its own interests are not undermined. At times, this has led to tensions such as accusations of Indian interference in Nepalese politics or blockades that strained bilateral relations. Yet, from New Delhi's perspective, such actions are often justified as necessary responses to protect its security and regional stability. In the broader context of the US-China rivalry, India cannot afford to be a passive observer of Nepal's political trajectory, because every regime change in Kathmandu alters the balance of power in South Asia, either reinforcing India's strategic position or weakening it in favor of its adversaries. The impact of Nepal's regime change drama on the global balance of power lies in the way this seemingly small nation has become a mirror reflecting the tensions between the world's most influential states. While Nepal itself is not a global power, its location and political orientation influence the strategic calculations of Washington, Beijing, and New Delhi, thereby affecting broader geopolitical dynamics. In a world already polarized by the growing US-China rivalry, then every shift in Kathmandu is interpreted as a gain or loss for one side, making Nepal a symbolic and practical battleground for influence. The drama unfolding in Nepal is not isolated within its borders. It reverberates through international institutions, regional alliances, and the security concerns of neighboring countries. For the United States, Nepal represents a chance to demonstrate that its Indo-Pacific strategy is not just rhetoric but actionable policy. By strengthening ties with Nepal, Washington signals to its allies and adversaries alike that it still retains influence in Asia and can challenge Beijing's Belt and Road dominance. Success in Nepal would show other smaller nations in the region that partnership with the United States can yield development, investment, and political backing. On the other hand, if China succeeds in tightening its grip on Nepal, it would highlight Washington's declining influence in a region critical to global trade and security, thus altering perceptions of America's ability to counter Beijing. China, meanwhile, views Nepal as a frontline state in its defense of Tibet and its broader western frontier. If Nepal gravitates toward the US, Beijing would consider it a direct encroachment on its security zone, a sign that Washington is edging closer to China's borders. Conversely, then keeping Nepal firmly within its economic and political orbit strengthens Beijing's claim to regional leadership and showcases the reach of its Belt and Road Initiative. Such influence does not stay confined to South Asia but ripples into forums like the United Nations, where Nepal's stance on sensitive issues could reflect the success of China's soft power strategy. India, as the immediate neighbor, sees any transformation in Nepal's alignments as a direct challenge to its traditional influence in South Asia. If Nepal tilts toward China or the US, at India's expense, it could signal a weakening of New Delhi's regional leadership and embolden rival states to challenge India in its own neighborhood. This in turn affects how other powers view India's role as a rising global actor. Thus, Nepal's regime change drama is not just about a small nation's politics. It is a pivotal piece in the larger contest shaping global power alignments in the 21st century. Nepal's struggle for sovereignty in the midst of competing superpowers highlights one of the greatest challenges faced by smaller nations in an era of intensifying global rivalry. Positioned between two powerful neighbors and increasingly courted by a distant superpower, Nepal must constantly navigate the fine line between cooperation and dependence. Each political decision taken in Kathmandu is watched closely by Washington, Beijing, and New Delhi, with each power interpreting it through the lens of their own strategic interests. This leaves Nepal vulnerable to external pressures, where its internal politics are influenced not solely by domestic concerns, but by the competing agendas of larger states. Maintaining independence under these conditions requires exceptional political skill and unity, both of which are often undermined by Nepal's internal divisions and shifting alliances. The difficulty of preserving sovereignty becomes clear when examining how foreign aid and investment are tied to broader strategic expectations. When the United States promotes development initiatives like the MCC, it comes with the unspoken condition of aligning with Washington's democratic vision and Indo-Pacific strategy. China, on the other hand, offers massive infrastructure projects and financial support under the Belt and Road Initiative. But those benefits come at the cost of deeper economic dependency and long-term obligations. Even India, despite its cultural and historical closeness, has at times used its influence in ways that raise questions in Kathmandu about whether Nepal's autonomy is being respected. These realities mean Nepal's sovereignty is constantly being tested, not through military invasion, but through the weight of economic promises, and diplomatic maneuvers and political influence. For ordinary Nepalese, the issue of sovereignty is not merely theoretical. It determines whether their country can make decisions in the best interest of its people rather than being forced into choices that benefit outside powers. Political instability fueled by foreign interests has often distracted Nepal from focusing on critical issues such as governance, economic growth, and disaster preparedness. This cycle of dependence and instability only deepens the challenge of standing firm as an independent state. What makes the struggle even more complicated is the fact that Nepal cannot completely isolate itself from its powerful neighbors or global players. Its economy, geography, and strategic location ensure that it will always attract interest from competing powers. The question is not whether Nepal can avoid foreign influence, but whether it can manage that influence in a way that safeguards its sovereignty. The drama of regime changes in Nepal often masks this deeper battle for independence, where the country seeks to assert control over its destiny even as larger forces pull it in conflicting directions.